Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're talking about the spell Steel Wind Strike. Yeah. All right. This one's kind of weird. What does this do?
Okay, 5th level spell Conjuration from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. It's a ranger spell and a wizard spell. You flourish the weapon, which you need one, and it requires somatic and material components, takes an action to cast. It requires a melee weapon worth at least a silver piece. You flourish the weapon using casting, and then vanish to strike like the wind. Choose up to 5 creatures you can see within range, make a melee spell attack against each of them. On hit, it takes 6d10 force damage. You can then teleport to an unoccupied space within 5 feet of one of the targets you hit or missed. The idea being, like, this is a... And then, like, you land in this final slot. This is about as anime as you could possibly get in Dungeons & Dragons. It is pretty fine wizard spell. And that's unfortunate. Because that means it's not a pretty fine.
Let me get one thing out of the way first. You cast this spell. Are you physically teleporting around with your weapon, bopping these guys, or is it just the weapon hitting them, or it's just spell effect or whatever?
Okay, so rules, how the rules function. You are teleporting from one space to one other space. So you're starting wherever you're casting a spell from. It's got a range of 30 feet. You attack 5 creatures within that 30 feet, all simultaneously with the Steel Wind Strike. And you teleport to a space next to one of the targets of your choice. So
you can. Does that mean you have the option not to?
Yes, it means you can remain where you are or teleport to a spot within 5 feet of them.
Yeah.
Which, it's visually what's supposed to be happening is you're teleporting to each one instantaneously, right, or in a very quick succession. That's not mechanically what's happening. Yeah, that's important because, like, you're not leaving threat ranges. You aren't doing any effects. Like, you're never physically within 5 feet of creatures you don't want to necessarily be within 5 feet of. There's not going to be reactions whenever you attack a creature within 5 feet of them. So if you, for example, something had a reaction of whenever you are attacked by a melee spell attack, or by a creature within 5 feet of you, I should say, you could do a thing. But it would proc on whenever a creature makes a melee spell attack against you, or makes a melee attack against you. That reaction would still apply. So there are some niche little rules things almost never going to come up that make this a little bit finicky, but for the most part, the fantasy it's selling is what's happening. You're teleporting around, slashing a bunch of stuff, and landing either where you started or within 5 feet of one of the targets.
All right, Ranger and Wizard. That's not a combination you see all the time. I imagine this must be differently effective for each of them.
By quite a bit. So this is a 5th level spell. Wizards get 5th level spells at 9th level, halfway through the game, hypothetically. They also get Fireball, and I figure I'd do a quick number crunch. So this is doing 60-10 damage, and guess Fireball does 10d6 damage for a 5th level spell slot. So you're getting, like, almost identical numbers. The difference being this is an attack that can miss, whereas Fireball will always do half damage. It hits a better area, and there's a lot of things that make Fireball better.
Limited. This is limited to top 5 creatures.
Yes, Fireball's an absolute crazy good spell. This is a perfectly fine downgrade, but not that much of a downgrade to it, especially if it's the fantasy you want. To do 5th level Fireball as a 9th level wizard, that's fine. We already said that's not better than what they're doing at 9th level. That's not better than an upcast version of a spell they've had at their 5th level. Having to wait till level 17 to get access to this really yoinks all of the luster away from it. And it gets worse. Because it's a melee spell attack, you use your spellcasting ability modifier to make the attack rolls. So if you're a ranger who's got a 20 dex, a 14 wisdom, you get the +2, not the +5. Oof. That's rough.
Yeah. So you're never using this as Ranger. Like, I can't think of an instance. And I mean, unless you really, really like the fantasy, you're probably never using this as Wizard.
Yeah. I ultimately think that's exactly where this thing lands. It's something you take for the fantasy. If you are taking it as, like, your Ranger capstone, I hope you haven't had a wizard in the party, or, like, any full casters in the party, because every full caster by this point will have a way to do more than 60-10 damage in a better area than this. this is it's so infuriating to me that this got printed this way. I can't fathom why it got printed this way. It's a ranger spell that requires them make spell attacks with their spellcasting modifier and doesn't synergize at all with making regular weapon attacks. You can't do, if this will let you make attack rolls with your weapons and also did bonus damage, I'd be like, this could be a great level 17 ranger spell. This doesn't have to be 9th level spell good. It should be, but it doesn't have to be 9th level good for it to be better than all the other ranger options. But this isn't. This isn't anywhere close to where it needs to be power-wise to fulfill the fantasy. And then on top of that, it just doesn't work in the vast majority of ranger builds in a compelling way.
Yeah, I mean, I've already kind of given up on it as ranger. I'm trying to think of justifications to use it as a wizard. 'Cause, I mean, rangers, I've got nothing.
I mean,
But,
at least like conceivably as a ranger, this is a way to do attack 5 things at once as opposed to the 2 things at once. You get a base range, but then like you could Swift Quiver and attack 4 things on your turn anyway, and then attack 4 things on every turn subsequent after that anyway. And then that uses the modifiers that you built your character around, as opposed to the wisdom modifier that you definitely didn't. That seems like a way better option. Like Swift Quiver makes sense to me as a top line ranger fantasy, and I feel like it feels like it was designed to be a ranger spell first, and then they just didn't make it work with ranger, and now it's a wizard spell, and I'm like, it's worse than Fireball. It has there's no benefit to upcasting this. Like to upcast Fireball means 5th level spells should be better than it. A 5th level spell should be better than a 3rd level spell upcast to 5th level. They should do something beyond what the 3rd level spell is capable of doing. Otherwise, the 3rd level spell is just strictly better than it. This is one of those instances where Fireball, because it can't miss, is going to feel strictly better than Steel Wind Strike in almost every instance. This is sculpted, so hypothetically, you're only hitting the 5 things you care about within the range. You're not blowing up your friends. Sure. Most of the time when you're casting Fireball, again, because of how D&D combat works, is the 2 sides kind of smash each other, and then there's a very clear, like, dividing line that you sculpt the Fireball into. That's where it normally is like, oh, this isn't a really relevant use case in most fights. Steel Wind Strike doesn't get that much of an upside for it, so even on Wizards, I'm like, you put it on a Blade Singer because it's cool, I guess? The teleport isn't nothing? That's something, I guess?
But it's only, I mean, the range is only 30 feet, so the teleport isn't even that amazing.
Yeah, it's like they stapled.
If you want to teleport next to somebody you just hit as a wizard, I can't think of many instances where I'd want to do that unless, they're on the other side of a wall that I wanted to get over. I don't know.
Sure. This really should just say you teleport to an occupied space you can see within the range, and I'd be like, yeah, all right, sure. At least then you're teleporting somewhere else too, and it'll feel cool. The limitation to it seems really weird. And by weird, I mean like I get it thematically. Mechanically, it doesn't really do anything you want it to be doing in a meaningful way. Again, maybe you are the Blade Singer character, so next turn you intend to attack it twice.
You know what? I think
that doesn't seem great still.
I think I'd like this as a 1st level spell, and maybe it just did like D8 damage.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Because then, rangers could get use out of it. Wizards could do that, yeah.
I think you could have this damage be really low. As a 1st level spell that's a mobility option, I'd be way more about it. And that sounds cool as hell. Like, even sticking at 2nd level to make it do 2d6 or something. There's a dozen ways to rework this to make it feel good on a ranger and wizard. And to make it at least, like the rangers at least care about it.
Yeah.
I really don't think these 2 classes overlap enough that this kind of spell can exist and satisfy both. Like, if we do, like, let's consider this just let you use your regular weapon attacks, then it becomes pretty buoy on wizards, because wizards have a low strength and mediocre decks at best. The wizards, like I said earlier, rangers have the opposite problem, where you normally like have 14 decks, if that, 14 to 16 at best, and most of the time you're spending, you need feats and stuff still too, so you can't stack all of your ability scores to maximum more often than not, so you're normally thinking like just a 20 decks at best. Yeah, I don't know. There were definitely ways this spell could have been cool, and the fantasy is definitely cool. I know players that would love to use it. I've had a character that would take this spell specifically for the theme. It just, that character was a ranger, and thus never got to 17th level, and thus even if they had gotten to the tier where they would want to use this, wouldn't, because it's not good.
What is the fantasy? This is you mentioned anime. This is would this be like a teleportation kind of character?
It's like a super fast,
Yeah,
you
all right.
strike in a pattern,
Skirmisher,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. You end up somewhere else, you're moving at inhuman speeds, you know, you're darting around the field going,
Yeah, see,
that's what it feels like to me.
that doesn't feel like a very wizardy thing to do.
Not
That
even a
does
little bit.
feel like a ranger kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I guess wizards have other options for high mobility that this could. Yeah, I'm just thinking if you're trying to make a themed character, there's haste but that's a totally different feel. This even at a thematic level, I'm not sold on this.
I just really think it.
This is like a theme by itself that doesn't really feel like a. Wizards don't have a ton of other skirmishing options, right?
They're not supposed to either,
Yeah,
right? They're supposed to be these, like, for the most part, wizards are backline damage batteries. That's what they do. And then the Bladesinger is like you break from that. And even they're still relatively frail. And they're not these super engaging casters. They are more skirmishing, where they're using teleportation magic to get in and out of stuff. They're running up, stabbing some stuff a couple of times, and using defensive stuff like Mirror Image. That's still a very different feel than the samurai that, has the dramatic line and then charges through the enemies and in a blink of an eye just cuts them all down. That to me feels monkish. That to me feels fighter-ish. That to me feels ranger-ish, not wizard. It doesn't feel like a arcane bladesmith does that. It feels like a really high fantasy martial character does that.
Yeah.
This could say 8d10 force damage, be a ranger only, and have it let them make regular attack rolls with it, and I'd be like, yeah, sure, fine. It's not amazing. It's a little bit better than Fireball. Has a 17 level feature, whatever. It's kind of as good as you can ask for. For where it is now, I don't want it on either class. I want consistency. I don't think there are wizard characters that I readily am taking this on. I know there are some people that there are, though. It's just, on those characters, it's a slightly worse upcast Fireball, and that's not a great place for a 5th level spell to be.
No. Yeah, I agree 100%. How bad is it?
2, I think.
2?
I think it's still doing fireball damage to 5 things. It's sculpted, and the wizards can take it and not feel that bad about it. Bladesingers in particular. That's really it. I think if you're a wizard, this is a 2. It's uncastable on ranger as expected. And that's how it is.
All right, you've talked me into it. I was ready to give it a 1, but yeah,
60-10 is still a lot of damage.
Yeah. And like you said, if in those situations where you don't want to fireball your friends, and you've mentioned that thing before with the 2 groups of enemies clashing, but in games I've played, fireballing your friends happens quite a bit.
Fair.
Because you want to do more damage to your enemies, hopefully, but you
get one extra enemy in it, but it means hitting 3 of your buddies. It's worth it.
So for that reason, I'll agree with your 2. All right, that was Steel Wind Strike. Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.